Bonjour, 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 and welcome to this presentation. My name is Marcin Latauo. My name is Latauo, Marcin Latauo. And I'm a director, actor, photographer, writer, guide, Google guide. And I'm here to introduce you to my workshop series, to my series called the Decalog, with a C. So what is the Decalog? Well, it's many things, but first of all, it's a workshop series. It's here on Facebook, and later we will also use other social media, like YouTube, Instagram, etc. And we're doing workshops once a month, which are online, here, and which are also in person. The online workshops are absolutely free and always will be, like Mr. Zuckerberg says about Facebook, which is not free at all. And the in-person workshops, depending on which workshops we're talking about, some will be free. The children workshops will be free for children in difficulty, and the adult workshops will be paid, and they will give you the opportunity to make your scenario, to write your screenplay, to shoot your film, shoot a trailer for your film, to post-produce it using artificial intelligence, using all the latest tools in artificial intelligence, especially Google, which I'm a specialist, with 36 million views on my photos on Google Maps. And then you will be able to present your project to distributors and producers and distributors, and to get financing. So this is very simple, and we have, let's say, Decalogue, of course, should be 10 chapters, because the Decalogue stems from the Bible, from Moses. But after that, it was also used in Catholic religion, in Muslim religion. The Buddhists also use the Decalogue. They have 10 dharmas, 10 laws, 5 times 2, which they follow. And the Protestants, there are many Decalogues. We can trace the roots back to the Code of Hammurabi, which is in the Louvre, which is also one of the places that we will visit during this Decalogue. It's also very interesting because yesterday there was a break-in. We are here in the south of Paris, in the house that belonged to my mother, Maria Stauber. And there's a door open because, like Jean Renoir said, you always have to leave a door open because reality might enter through it. You always have to leave a door open on the film set because reality might enter through it. Of course, Jean Renoir was a French filmmaker, and he was shooting in the 40s and 50s and a bit later, and he was using all the studio systems. So it was a very different time from now, where we have a simple telephone and we can even use artificial intelligence on this telephone. And here we are in this house, which belonged to my mother. It's a beautiful house. You will see it later. I will show you around. It has incredible mosaics on the outside. They were made by an artist in the 1950s. But that's another chapter in the Decalogue. Actually, the first chapter in the Decalogue is called Illuminations. It's a prologue of sorts. Illuminations are, of course, a very universal concept, like the Decalogue. And for me personally, of course, a very important concept, because my father, Stanisław Latauo, who died in 1974 in the Himalayas, he was a cinematographer. He was an actor in the film Illumination by Krzysztof Zanussi. Oh, here's a photo of my dad, with his camera here in Nepal. Photo taken by the director who accompanied him on the Everest, on the Lhotse mountain, and this is when my father died, on the Khumbu glacier. And if you have seen my film about my father called A Trace, which I'm now remaking with artificial intelligence, we're making a postscriptum in the second version, you might recognize this. This is a letter, one of the letters that my father wrote from Mount Lhotse, which is actually a testament. And so this Decalogue is also a testament of sorts. It's also a letter addressed to my friends and masters, to the remarkable men and women I met in my life and the lessons I learned from them. Great directors, great writers. The first one I was too young to remember. His name was Tadeusz Konwicki. I mean, no, I do remember moments from this film set with Tadeusz Konwicki. It was my father's film, and later this film, here's the book about my father in Polish, the unfinished portrait that we made with my mother, and which was published by Heart for the 30th anniversary of death of my father. So of course that was Freudian slip, very interesting, or Jungian slip, because I'm more inspired by Carl Gustav Jung and by his books, which we will also discuss, because we will also discuss adaptation and the inspiration that you can get from books, from life, from different sources, from photographs, from films, from other films, from music, of course, and from life. Yeah, from life, like the sunlight now in the garden. Let's see if I can show you this sunlight in the garden. So this first film was when I was only 2 years old, and it was this film here. It's called So Far Away, So Close. It's a film by Tadeusz Konwicki, who was a director, and he was also a writer. He also made this adaptation of this Polish writer Czesław Miłosz, The Valley of Issa. Another beautiful film. And so those were my beginnings as a child actor. You can see that film if you are interested. You can see the short film that conveyed by my father, in which I played baby Jesus. It was in 1968 or 69. 69. I was 2 years old. My father was made this very beautiful short film, which he shot on old Orvo tape, which was an old East German tape, and it was périmé. It was old. It was used, and so the colors came out in a completely incredible way. And this, sorry, I didn't want this. Oops, sorry, we had a little technical problem. Are we back online? Yeah, we're back online. Hello. So I was telling about this film made by my father, and which this great writer-director Tadeusz Konwicki inserted into his film, which is quite incredible for that time. Jak daleko stąd jak blisko, So Far Away, So Close, a film shot in 71, with the main role was played by Andrzej Łapicki and Maja Komorowska. And my father was second unit on that film, and he used this old Orvo tape to achieve incredible painterly effects, evocative of Parajanov, maybe you can say. And this short film, where I played baby Jesus, was a metaphor about Jews being thrown out of Poland in 1968 after an anti-Semitic campaign orchestrated by the government, the communist government, of course, to quench the student protests in Warsaw. Which is interesting because in 68, a few months later, in May, in France, students protested also. And in Poland, these students were protesting against communism. And in France, these students were communism who were protesting against capitalism. So there were students, but on each side of the Iron Curtain. So that was very interesting difference. And so I played, so you can see this film on my webpage, latalo.com. And you can see as this holy family, that's the title of the film, is forced, they leave, metaphorically, they leave the country, they ride on a yellow motorbike with this big sidecar, and I'm in this little sidecar, this little boy in this sidecar. And it's also an interesting story because the mother, Maria, was played by a friend of my father's, Irena Grudzińska-Gross, who had just left. She was part of the student movement, of the student protest, and she was just released from prison. And 1 week later, she left the country. She left Poland. And a little bit later, my grandparents, who were also of Poles with Jewish roots, also left Poland for Germany. But that's another story that you can follow in this Decalog series. So, like I said, the introduction is the illumination. So that's the title for this film in which my father played, but it's also one of the oldest concepts in philosophy and religion. And also it continues in poetry. For instance, Arthur Rimbaud, to find a way, or maybe that's more interesting to show books like that. Arthur Rimbaud, this is an early book by Arthur Rimbaud, the Cahiers de Douai, and Arthur Rimbaud's book was called Illuminations. It later inspired Benjamin Britten's composition, Illuminations. And so it's a notion that will be with us during the whole Decalogue series. So the Decalogue series is basically two things. It's like a 360 idea, but it's basically two things. It's a workshop series and it's a docufiction series. And the workshop will allow us to explore different aspects of writing, casting, choosing the image, preparing the image with the director of photography. So we'll talk about photography, about cinematography. We will talk about sound and about music. We will talk about the arts. So that's makeup, costumes, scenography. We will talk about production values, special effects, editing, which is the moment where everything is put together. That was a very important also aspect for Kieślowski, Krzysztof Kieślowski, who we will also talk a lot about, with whom I worked, of course, on his films, The Double Life of Véronique and The Three Colors, and about distribution. And of course, we will use artificial intelligence to discuss how all these aspects of cinema will now be changed, and what will change and how it will change. But first we have this Decalogue. So I started referring to this Decalogue earlier because of this Code of Hammurabi, which is this stele, this stone with engraved laws, which precedes Moses, actually, and which is in the Louvre. And that's an interesting aspect because the Louvre has been just robbed yesterday. And they stole these incredibly precious crown jewels in broad daylight. They brought up a ladder, they went through the window, and they escaped on motorbikes, and they lost a crown. One of the crowns fell out, so the police found it, but the others have disappeared. And of course, this is also interesting because the Louvre is another place for another story, which is also very linked to these workshops, and that's the story of Apollinaire, of Guillaume Apollinaire, and of Pablo Picasso, his best friend. And they were accused of, Apollinaire went to prison, where now the same prison where now tomorrow President Sarkozy will go. And this Apollinaire, wait, I'm looking for this book by Guillaume Apollinaire. And Apollinaire was suspected of having participated in the theft of the Joconde. He was released. Picasso came to see him and said he didn't know him, while Apollinaire was the person who actually made Picasso famous. He invented the word cubism to describe the paintings of Picasso, especially this one painting which we'll talk about, Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. And this Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, where is it? I can't find it. Les Demoiselles d'Avignon was, oh, maybe it's here. A painting that Picasso did after staying at the villa of Georges Seurat, but he was inspired by 4 African statues that Apollinaire's secretary had stolen for him from the Louvre and had sold him. And so this is how the connection went, and this is why later Apollinaire was suspected of stealing La Joconde, which is also one of the reasons why La Joconde became so famous. The painting became so famous. So back to the Decalogue and to Kieślowski. So we have, of course, the series Decalogue is inspired by Krzysztof Kieślowski's work in 1988. That's when I met him. I was introduced to him by our common friend and my father's friend, Agnieszka Holland, with whom I worked on the film Europa, which will Hitler Junge Salomon, which we'll also discuss. And she introduced me to Krzysztof, who was editing the Decalogue. And soon after that, he went. So this was a TV series he made in 1988 for Polish television with a ridiculous small budget. I think it was 100,000 zlotys. I'm not even sure, but it was really, really small. And he wanted to make 2 of the films, number 5 and number 6, Du Shalt Not Kill, and Du Shalt Not Covet Thy Neighbor's Wife. He wanted to make them in cinema version. So it will be 50 minutes long. It's very simple stories. I mean, the stories are of moral dilemmas, so they're quite complicated. But the setup is very simple. It was a few actors, some of the best Polish actors in the time, and they all live in the same tenement buildings on the north, in a cité, in a place on the north of Warsaw. And everything happens there. There are no special effects. And he wanted to make 2 of the episodes longer so they could be distributed in cinema, 5 and 6. And Polish television told him that they didn't have enough money, that he could either do the 10 films, but not the cinema films, or he could do 8 films. Decalogue, 8 films. Okay, this is brilliant. This is really brilliant. So that's the story of this Decalogue by Kieślowski, and our Decalogue is again set in the modern world. So we're here in Montrouge, where I am now, and our Decalogue starts here, but then we will, it's local, we live in a completely different world. Oh, yeah, I have little, Kieślowski liked these little toys, and this one is actually, by happy accident, was on my table. And so we will try to make these concentric circles around the world, starting from here, thinking, acting locally, but thinking globally. What can we change in our reality around us? We have wonderful tools of the internet. We have wonderful tools of the 21st century. We have telephones. We even have glasses now. We have computers. We have the internet. So we can make these films. We can make a difference. We can change something. And we have artificial intelligence now, which is really an incredible tool that I'm really also recommending everyone to learn to use. My favorite for the moment is Gemini, because it's together with the whole Google ecosystem, with Gmail and Google Maps and all the other Google Workspace products. And yes, I'm advertising these products because the Decalog has also an advertisement parts, where we try to advertise things that are valuable, that are interesting, like books, literature, music, art, poetry, and human rights. Because this Decalog is mostly on human rights. Actually, when I started writing this idea, and we started discussing it with Christoph before he died. He died in '96. He had a heart operation, a bypass, and he didn't survive that because he was in Poland. And the doctors were not very good. Yeah. And I was really, it was one of the most important events in my life. My father's death, of course, in '74 in the Himalayas, and Christoph's death in '96. But before he died, we worked together on 4 films. So Agnieszka introduced me to him during the making of the Decalog. Then he went to Cannes. He made a big, he received a big award there and became very famous. And then he came to France, and we worked together on Double Life of Véronique, and then on the film the trilogy called The Three Colors. So, of course, we will discuss these films too, and I had the chance of being the translator of the screenplays, so of course screenplays will be a very important aspect. So here is another screenplay, that's Krzysztof Zanussi's screenplay for different stories, different films he made. Próba ciśnienia, I don't even know the title. Oh, there was a short film he made in Poland, in the film school, in the Lodz Film School, which we'll also discuss. And interestingly, the director of photography was Adam Hollander, who also worked with, who was the director of photography on a film where I also worked about the Polish priest Jerzy Popiełuszko, tragic story of a Polish priest murdered during the state of war in Poland in '84, if I'm not wrong. And so here we have the structure of Crystal, which is a classical film, Family Life, and Illumination, where my father played the main part. And it's also very interesting because Illumination here, the script we have is a script that was made after after shooting. And because the script was just a few notes. This Zanussi writes about this here in the beginning, that it was just a few notes, and that most of it was actually improvised by my father and the other actors, but my father is on the screen all the time, and most of it was improvised in real situation during the shooting. So de facto, my father is a co-author of this film, which is not credited for. That's a shame. I think we should change that. There's a lot of things we should change. I think we should change in the world, and this is why this Decalogue is about human laws as much as it is about divine laws. And so later Kieślowski made this, the Three Colors. This is the last of the trilogy, Three Colors Red, with Jean-Louis Trintignant and Irène Jacob, the actress Irène Jacob, revealed by Kieślowski in Double Life of Véronique, which I also worked as a translator. And here you have, oh, here it is, translation by, and again, I'm not credited for this, so I really have to change that. So one of the books we will use here is the penal code, French penal code. So Decalogue is also a story of rights, of authors' rights, of human rights, of divine rights, of moral rights, of different, of rights and wrongs, basically, because we have different rights and wrongs. And so we're going to be inspired, like I said, by literature. So what's interesting about these two scripts, for instance, is that they're purely cinematographic. They were written from scratch from the ideas of the directors. While many Polish films, and so now we're sort of going backwards, but many of the Polish films were inspired by books, by literature, and Polish filmmakers had always an incredible relationship with Polish literature, of course. I've shown you before this book by this book by Czesław Miłosz, which was adapted by Tadeusz Konwicki, but we also have, of course, a lot of books from other. Oh, this is another, of course, very important Polish book, The Piano Player, the Pianista by Władysław Szpilman. So it's an autobiographical account which has been adapted by Roman Polanski, whom I do admire as a filmmaker, but not as a person. Actually, we have his book here somewhere. That's interesting too. And we will also talk about other inspiration. This is another example. So that's a French translation of Dostoevsky, The Possessed, Les Possédés. In the French translation, the second translation, let's say modern translation, it's called The Demons. In Polish it was called Biesy, and Biesy was a film by Andrzej Wajda, which I saw. I was a young kid. I was a translator then. I was assisting this very good translator who was his father. He was called Michał Lisowski. His father was Georges Lisowski, who was a translator of Polish literature. And Michał was a translator on the set, and I was assisting him. We had all these fantastic actors. Jerzy Radziwiłłowicz, who played Szatow, the main character. Lambert Wilson played Stavrogin. There was Isabelle Huppert, and also a young actress who was very trendy at that time, Philippine Leroy-Beaulieu. And now she's mostly famous because she plays in Emily in Paris, and Lambert Wilson, of course, played in The Matrix. And Isabelle Huppert is one of the greatest film stars in France, in the world probably. And another chapter will be also dedicated to her. And here we have another person which I admired a lot, which I met just before. So the Possessed was in 1985, and before that, 1 year before, I returned to Poland because I was living in France, and I returned to Poland to work on the set of Chronicle of Amorous Incident, which was a film by Andrzej Wajda. Here he is with his wife, with Krystyna Zachwatowicz, Wajda, his wife, who is one of the heroes. They are one of the heroes of the first chapter of this Decalog, of our Decalog, called Short Stories of Love. Interestingly, this Andrzej Wajda film was adapted from a book by Tadeusz Konwicki, with whom my father had worked before, but I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know how important this would all be for me, because I was a troubled kid. And one of the stories, so The Illuminations is my own autobiographical story. That's the documentary part. And there's a fiction part where I play Mateusz Retman, who is the son of Franciszek Retman, the physicist, the hero of The Illumination, the film by Krzysztof Zanussi and by my father. And which was also the most important film. It premiered the retrospective by Martin Scorsese. Martin Scorsese Presents Polish Cinema. And so this this story of love. So this is one is a documentary about me, about my life, about meetings with remarkable men and women. Like I said before, the different directors I worked with. I also worked with this director. I mean, the director who adapted this book into a film. So that the book is by Ken Kelsey. It's called One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and I'm talking about Miloš Forman, who made the film Valmont in France. okay, I have to check the dates. It was interesting because at the same time, the same book was adapted by Stephen Frears, and the version by Milos Forman starred Colin Firth and Annette Bening, and the version by Stephen Frears starred John Malkovich and Glenn Close, Uma Thurman, and was much better. But the nice part is we got to shoot in Versailles when the palace was closed. So that's another place we're going to hopefully visit during this workshop. Oh yeah, also about the Louvre, one thing which I wanted to say is there's a beautiful documentary that I would like also to organize a screening, and it's by Nicolas Philibert, and it's about the Louvre. So, remarkable men and women, and then so we have the 10 chapters dedicated to different aspects of filmmaking. The first one will be dedicated to this personal story. Then we have this character, fictional character, Mateusz Redman, which I'm playing, who is a quantum physicist. So we will also talk about quantum mechanics and the incredible things which are now discovered in our world. We will talk about love, so short stories of love, which I mentioned before, the love between artistic loves, I would say, between Andrzej Wajda and this actually was a marriage, and his wife Krystyna Zachwatowicz, and she's still alive. Andrzej passed away many years ago. I have some materials that I would like to show you about that. We will talk about Agnieszka Holland, with whom I worked on this film Europa. We'll also talk about TV series. Here is a TV series, a box by Agnieszka Holland of a TV series which was called Ekipa, which was a story of a fictional Polish government. And interestingly, this Polish government appears when the president dies in a plane accident, which happened in reality a few years later, that the Polish president was killed while he was going to the ceremony of the Katyn murders in Russia, and he was killed with 100 members of the government, Lech Kaczyński, of course. So all these stories are interconnected, are linked one to another. The 10 chapters of this modern-day Decalogue take us to different places. We start here in France, in Paris, but we can also go back to Poland. Here is a book by Isaac Bashevis-Singer called Enemies, which has also been adapted in a film where this Polish actress Małgorzata Zajączkowska plays one of the 3 women that this hero is torn between. And so we will also have a masterclass with her about acting. We have, of course, this is a wonderful author. Bizarre is a series of short stories by Roald Dahl. So many people know Roald Dahl's children books, but he also wrote a lot of stuff for adults. Wes Anderson did some fantastic adaptations of his short stories. And this was Someone Like You, were different stories written in the 1950s, early 1950s. We have this is another very important aspect. It's the Spanish Civil War. So the Spanish Civil War here, the book by Ernest Hemingway, but the Spanish Civil War was mostly for us. The interest in the Spanish Civil War is because of all the incredible writers and photographers and future politicians that went there, of these, I think, 50,000 people from all around the world who gathered, who went to Spain, risking their lives and often losing their lives to support the cause of democracy, because everybody was afraid that if Franco would win, then Hitler and Mussolini, who were supporting Franco, would also take over in the countries, and that it would provoke World War II, and that's exactly what happened. And so especially we're interested in the story of 4 photographers, 4 friends. I'm looking if I can find the book about them, but I'm afraid I don't. I don't have it here with me. But you can check it out on my webpage, latalo.com, and there you can check out the story of David Seymour, who was called David Shimin when he arrived from Poland in France in 1936, and he was a photographer and a journalist. He became friends with Henri Cartier-Bresson, who gave him the nickname Shim, which he kept later. And then he also befriended two emigrant photographers, a couple, Endre Friedman and his girlfriend Gerta Pochoryle. She was from Germany, but had a Polish passport. He was from Hungary. They were both Jewish, and they had a hard time living in Paris and in those days. And so Gerda, probably Gerda, because she was fluent in several languages, she could type, and she was a very intelligent woman. She had been arrested by the Nazis who were rising in her home country, Germany. She came from Stuttgart, and she invented she invented the name Robert Capa for her boyfriend Endre Friedman because it sounded American, and they pretended that he was this great American photographer who was very busy and who made these photographs, and it worked. It worked so well that when they went to Spain, all the four of them together, they made this Gerda Taro and Robert Capa, as they were called then, worked together, and they made this famous picture of the fallen soldier, which was, so the theory is that this photograph was staged, which is very likely because there were no conflicts in the area of Espejo where the photographs were taken, but maybe there was a sniper. We are not quite sure of that, but we know that Capa became famous at the time, and that Gerda died during the Spanish Civil War. And she was buried in Paris at the Père Lachaise, which is another place I invite you to when you come to Paris for our Decalog workshops. And probably, we can also go to Spain to investigate the story of Robert Capa and Gerda Taro. Then after that, Capa and Shimin went to, with the Spanish refugees. The war was lost, so they had the international brigades were disbanded. They had to leave Spain. They left on a boat, on a cruiser. They went to Mexico, then they went to New York. Shimin stayed there, worked at a photographic lab, and he became an American citizen. So he took the name David Seymour. And then Robert Capa went to Hollywood, and he started photographing Alfred Hitchcock film with Cary Grant and Ingrid Bergman in the main part. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot the title now. There are three main causes to memory loss, and they are old age, Alzheimer's, and marijuana. Guess which one causes my... Notorious, of course, it was the film Notorious, and Robert Capa and Ingrid Bergman fell in love at that time, which later inspired Hitchcock for his film Rear Window, where James Stewart played a war photographer, inspired by Robert Capa, and Grace Kelly, who is one of the other characters in these short stories of love, and Grace Kelly played his girlfriend, his fiancée. But the love story with Ingrid Bergman didn't last very long. Capa went on to he and Shimin, actually Seymour at that moment, went to Europe, and Capa participated in the landing on Omaha Beach on D-Day. He made these 11 famous photographs, the only photographer to have been there in the water, which inspired in turn, Steven Spielberg and his director of photography Janusz Kaminski for the film Saving Private Ryan. We will also talk about this director, cinematographer, friendship, short story of love, long story of love between Spielberg and Kaminski, which started on the set of Schindler's List. Schindler's List, which was shot in Poland in 1984. Another chapter about war children. So this is actually, we will still see, we're not going forward very fast because I'm really trying to explain everything we're going to work on together, but it's the second chapter of our Decalogue. So Shimin, just to finish the story of David Seymour. So David Seymour was in Britain at the time when Kappa was landing on Omaha Beach, and he had prepared the landing. He was working for the intelligence service, so he had prepared the landing of the Allies by observing photographs, aerial photographs of Normandy. And these two men continued their travel together. They met there's a photograph of Robert Capa, David Seymour, Henri Cartier-Bresson, and Lee Miller was also there, and they were at a party. They're at the party. The party is at the house of Michel de Brunoff, who was the editor of Vogue Paris at the time, which of course Vogue was suspended, but they made this party because it was the liberation of Paris. And for a long time I thought this photo was made by George Roger, who was a friend of Kappa, whom he met when he was making photographs in Italy during the Italy campaign. But George Roger was a British photographer who also was one of the Magnum members, but he was, at that time, he was in Belgium, so the author of the photo is unknown, but you can see these photos, you will analyze these photos, and we will give them life with artificial intelligence. You can see that on my webpage, of course. And so after the war, these four friends founded the Magnum Photo Agency, which was the first independent photo agency which kept the rights of the authors. And the photographers kept the rights for their photographs so they could make money out of them. That's very simple, right? And one of the first missions that David Seymour, Shim, took for Magnum, he was the first president of Magnum, and one of the first missions he took was for UNICEF, which was a newly founded organization to help the 13 million children that had lost their home, their families, or had been injured during World War II. And so Shim was the first UNICEF photographer, the first UNICEF ambassador. And he made a shattering, beautiful reportage called Children of Europe for UNICEF. And also, you can see this film that I made about this book. Very beautiful book, and we're organizing an exhibition about these photographs, which he made in 5 European countries. So he went to Greece, he went to Italy, he went to Hungary, to Austria first, Hungary next, and last he went to Poland, where his family had been killed in the Otwock ghetto. There's a photograph of them in front of this Pensionat Zachęta, which was the place where the family home was like an Airbnb. By the way, do you know that one of the presidents of Airbnb made a Decalog, which was people were sending them their best new 10 Commandments, and they made a reward, and it was actually published. And so this photograph shows Shim's family, his father, David Shimin, who was a very important editor in Poland before the war. And they wrote him a letter where they asked him for money to emigrate. And for some reason, he didn't send them the money. Don't make anti-Semitic jokes. I'm 50% Jewish, 50% anti-Semitic. That's 100% Polish, which is not quite true, because also in my Polish, Catholic, anti-Semitic family, there are Jews, of course. And then I was raised in Germany and in France, so you can't say I'm really Polish. But I tried to make you laugh. And yeah, and I think Shim had a very bad conscience, because he only returned to Poland in 1938 and his family was dead. And so he made these photographs of these orphans, and one of the most famous is the little girl Teresa. and she's drawing her home, and her home is like a barbed wire. Teresa had been injured by an explosion during to her head during the Warsaw Uprising, which will also be one of the chapters that we will discuss in this Decalogue, in the historical part of the Decalogue. So we're in the middle of chapter 2, probably, and we will slowly be moving on to, well, first let me finish the story of David Seymour. He went on to become a very famous photographer. He moved to in the 1950s, he moved to Rome. He made photos of Sophia Loren, of Gina Lollobrigida, of other film stars that were coming to Cinecittà in that time. He photographed the Pope. He photographed the Nobel Prize in Sweden. He photographed Winston Churchill in the Council of Europe in Strasbourg. Very beautiful photos that you can see on the Magnum website, and in my on my YouTube channel there's a short film about Shim, a short story of love. And then he started going to Israel, and he was very fascinated by this country, so he made photos of the first settlements there. And at some point in 54, actually, his friend Robert Capa died on a landmine in Vietnam, in Indochina during the war. And so Capa was dead, and so Shim became president of Magnum again for the second time. And he went to Israel to document the Suez Canal conflict, and he was killed at the Israeli-Egyptian border and sent back to New York, where he's buried. But his Leicas, they all used the Leica camera. Capa used different cameras, and Shim too, but that was their main camera. The most interesting, the best camera they had was a Leica camera, and the Leica cameras were lost somewhere on the Israeli-Egyptian border. Maybe they wound up on some Egyptian bazaar. Who knows? Maybe we will find them if we go to Egypt to continue this story. And sadly, Shim is completely forgotten. So this Decalogue is also to bring back certain forgotten people, certain forgotten stories that I hope you will find interesting. So we have 7 more chapters that will be dedicated. So chapter 1 is, like I said, short stories of love. We will also have, this is documentary part, but we'll also have a fiction part. The documentary part will take us through literature, children of war, like I said, ecology. We have an episode which is called SOS Planet. We have a music part, sound and music. We will tell the story of Stefan Kudelski, who was the inventor of the Nagra recording device, which was an old film set. You had this Nagra, which was this narrow band recording, which was very important. We have the story of different musicians, the story of songs that were translated in different languages, songs for peace, and which let's say, which were part of how dictatorships fell down. Where Have All the Flowers Gone is a good example. It was sung by Marlene Dietrich at the UNICEF. Songs by the Russian singer Buat Okudjava. Songs by another who was never published in his home country. He was actually only published in France. Another interesting story. And wait, I'm looking for this book by about this other singer. His name was Vysotsky, Volodya Vysotsky, and he was also an opponent to the communist regime. And there's a beautiful book that was written by his wife. He was married to this French actress for some time, Marina Vladi, and she wrote this book about their love story, Le vol arrêté, the interrupted flight. Where did I put it? Oops. It's like this Jew that goes to take a piss, and oh, here it is, sorry. And then he And he's with another friend, and he starts looking, and he can't find it. And what's going on? Well, when my wife takes something in her hand, I never can find it. Okay, sorry. Vladimir ou Le Vol Arrêté by Marina Vladi, a beautiful book about this love story of this French actress of Russian origins who fell in love with this Russian actor, poet, singer, who had this incredible strong voice. And he was a very good actor and a very strong character, but he was also an alcoholic, and she describes the terrible, like he disappeared for weeks and came back completely ruined, and completely ruined his life, actually. Alcohol completely ruined his life. And so also one important aspect of the Decalogue is that we will support different causes, humanitarian causes, like war children, war orphans. We discussed Tereska. People with disabilities. We have an episode that we will also talk about mental problems, mental health problems, alcoholism and addictions. Here is another about insanity. This is a beautiful manga by Gu Tanabe, who is a Japanese manga artist, and he adapted these incredible stories by Howard Phillips Lovecraft, one of my favorite science fiction horror writers, actually the founder of horror writings, I would say. And so that's another episode dedicated to horror writing, to genre writing. Here we have film by Jean Becker, a book. The book was by Denis Fernandez Recatala, and it's a how do you call it? It's an adaptation. It's a novelization of a film script by Jean Becker, starring Vanessa Paradis. And interestingly, Vanessa is one of our short stories of love. Here, I can recommend you the exposition at la Galerie de l'Instant in Le Marais called Paradisime, where we have photographs by Kate Barry, Matthew Brooks, Catherine Cabrol, Anton Corbin, Claude Gassian, Antoine Legrand, Paolo Reversi, Pierre Talasson, Hélène von Unwerf, Frédéric Vesset, and Bruce Weber, of this beautiful French film star and singer Vanessa Paradis, and also fashion icon, who modeled for Chanel and so on. And this brings us to another short story of love, another series of short stories of love about the fashion world, where we will talk about costume design in cinema, and like Jean-Paul Gaultier, for instance, who dressed Vanessa, and who was, of course, a very important fashion designer. He worked for a few years at the Hermès fashion house, and he also was the costume designer for The Fifth Element by Luc Besson, where he designed more than 1,000 costumes. I think it was something like 3,000 costumes. I don't know. We have to ask him. We will ask him. We will seek out these masters and discuss with them. So the masters of cinema, like I said, Steven Spielberg is a good example with Schindler's List, because we have Steven Spielberg, the director. We have Thomas Connelly, who wrote the book about Schindler's List. We have also Paul de Pfefferberg, who was I think he was a literary agent. I'm not even sure if he was an agent, but he was convinced that the book by Thomas Connelly, who is an Australian author, who told the true story of Oskar Schindler, and Paul de Pfefferberg would call Kubrick's office every week. Spielberg's office. I was confused because Kubrick also wanted to make a film about the Holocaust, which was called Aryan Papers, and we will discuss this in another chapter, the story of who was behind this book. And so I confused Kubrick and Spielberg, but Pfefferberg called Spielberg's office every week until, I think, for 9 years, until he finally convinced Spielberg to make this film. When then Spielberg chose Janusz Kaminski, who was a young director of photography, to shoot this film. He was actually shooting Jurassic Park, interesting, adapted by Michael Crichton's bestseller. and he agreed to do this because he agreed to shoot Schindler's List without a salary. So that's the production aspect, which is quite interesting. And so we have Janusz Kaminski. That was his first film with Steven Spielberg, so he chose black and white. And then there's the story of the little girl in the red dress. So we have also the costumes, which were made by Eva Braun, a Polish costume designer who received the Oscar. So here we have the tie-in with the costumes. And then we had set decoration by Alan Starsky, who also received the Oscar. There was Waldemar Pokromski, who was the makeup artist on Schindler's List. And of course the many actors like Andrzej Seweryn, for instance, who, I mean, I'm talking about the Polish actors now, but of course everybody thinks about Liam Neeson, who played Schindler, and Ben Kingsley, who played the accountant, and also Ralph Fiennes, who played Amon Goth, the bad guy. Very bad, very, very bad. Hitchcock used to say that the stronger the bad character, the better the film is, which I don't quite agree with, but the conflict has to be strong. So this we will discuss all this in the cinematic part of our workshops. We were talking about fashion, art, design. We will talk about sound and music. We will talk about the production process, how to make the film, and how artificial intelligence is going to make everything much, much cheaper. That's also very interesting. We will talk about the difference between fiction films. This was one of my masters. I never met him, but I saw a play by him in Poland, and I saw most of his films, of course, Ingmar Bergman, who had a long love story with theater. He was also a theater director, and he adapted a lot of theatrical plays. We'll also talk about documentaries. Here is a documentary by Paweł Łoziński, his father was a master of documentaries, and this was Paweł's first film, The Place of Birth, which was the story of this writer, Henryk Grinberg, who's looking for his father. Very beautiful place. Very beautiful film, sorry. Very beautiful film, and interestingly, Marcel Łoziński's uncle, Jean Vigo, who was a very interesting French filmmaker, is buried here nearby. On his grave is on the Cimetière de Bagneux, where we are here in the town of Montrouge. So we have a lot of things about the past. I was telling about my father. I will also like to tell you about my mother and my grandmother. And this is this book written by my mother, by Maria Stauber, about the friendship between my grandmother Lucia Stauber, and Zuzanna Ginczanka, a Polish-Jewish poet. So they both came from the city of Rivne, which was at the time at the border of Poland and the Soviet Empire, and now is part of Ukraine, in this terrible war that's going on there. So this is why we have also one chapter with many chapters which are dedicated to war and to how to stop these wars and to protest against these wars and protest against inequalities, like the three colors. An interesting story also is that Kieślowski thought that the three colors, bleu, blanc, rouge, blue, white, red, were the three colors of the flag, the French flag, and this I thought he thought that this meant liberté, égalité, fraternité. And so when we met for the first time with the producer, with Marine Karmitz, I think I'm the one who explained this to him, because he didn't speak French at all at the time. And so, but these notions of liberty, equality, fraternity, and sorority are, of course, very important in this Decalogue, which is not only 10 commandments, but also these three important words, or like in the song by Bulot Okudjava, Vera, Nadezhda, Lyubov, the three sisters. Vera is the three Russian names, and it's truth, Hope and Love. Wiara, Nadjeżdża, Lubow. A beautiful song. Generally, I really love Okudzava. Here we have also some comedy. So Gogol is a Russian-Ukrainian writer. He was from Kiev. I think he's the only. He wrote in Russian, but I think he was the only. No, wait. These are stories from Petersburg. So we will also talk about the Ukrainian culture and Russian culture. I mean, Russian culture is really fantastic, and the fact that now this country is ruled by this dictator is just so terrible and such a bad thing for the Russians that we really should do something about that. And so one of the propositions is music. Here is Georges Brassens. So we also have French, a very great French singer who was translated also in many languages, and whose opposition to the French society of his time, by poetry, by singing, was absolutely incredible. And his songs were incredible and translated in many languages. And so we have this map of Europe, which you can see on the chapter, which is called Music for Peace. We have a physical part. We have a part which is dedicated to our bodies, to our minds, and to the combination of both with martial art that I'm working on, which is inspired by a martial art which I practice. And one of my masters, Bernard Lépinot, just passed away a few days ago. He had cancer, and then he had his heart stopped. And we used to practice a Japanese martial art inspired by Japanese karate, but it's a martial art for peace. It's called Shintaido. And so I'm working on a version which is shorter and more for busy people, but also very using sticks, using bow sticks, which are Japanese sticks, 1 m, 80, cut in half. And so I'm using them a bit like lightsabers, like Jedis would use. So it's inspired by the Force. So it's called Shintai Jodo, the new way of the body and the stick, or it's called the Force. And hopefully we will also be able to talk about the masters of science fiction, of fantasy. So George Lucas, who invented this incredible Star Wars saga. And here we have also Tolkien, who invented fantastic world, which was very well adapted by Peter Jackson in The Lord of the Rings. But you know the story of two goats who come to Hollywood, and they go to these castings and they can't find a job. Nobody wants to hire goats. So finally they are very hungry and they enter the MGM lot, and they enter this warehouse, and the warehouse is stacked everywhere with film tape, 35 celluloid film tapes, rolls, but there's no food. So they take one roll, they open the box, and they start eating because they're so hungry. They start eating, and they chew at the celluloid, and one looks at the other and said, the book was better. So of course I advise you to read Lord of the Rings, but also to see the film, and so we can see how both compare. Generally we will try to compare films and books. We also have some children's books. I recommend this, of course, Janusz Korczak, King Matthias, one of the most beautiful writers, Polish writer, Polish Jew, who had very modern education methods. He was sort of pre-Montessori, I think, and he was also the head of the orphanage, the Jewish orphanage in the Warsaw Ghetto, and he was sent to Auschwitz. The children were sent to Auschwitz, and he chose to go with them, where he died. So there's a film by Andrzej Wajda with a screenplay by Agnieszka Holland, which is in the story of this man, Janusz Korczak. There's also a documentary about him, which we will probably try to see, by Joanna Grudzińska, who also made another film about Zuzanna Ginczanka, which I talked about earlier. Oh, here's Tolkien, which I recommend, of course, the books I recommend. Many books we have here. Kundera, which we discussed earlier, the Czech filmmaker Miloš Forman, and Kundera was also adapted by The Unbearable Lightness of Being was adapted by Philip Kaufman, with Daniel Day-Lewis and Juliette Binoche, who also played in Blue, in The Three Colors Blue. There's another book here by Kundera, The Joke, which I recommend. Yeah, we have a lot of books that we can talk about. A lot of films, a lot of photographs, records, music. We talked about sports, so we have, of course, films about sports are very interesting. And we have cooking, because we have to eat somewhere in between. So this is a book that was published by Les Restos du Cœur, a French caritative organization that was founded by the comic Coluche. And Coluche lived in Montrouge, here in Montrouge, nearby, in one of the places where we're going to shoot the Decalog. And he made a big career in Café Théâtre, so it was like this place where people come and he made all these jokes. He made a big career in television, and in cinema. At some point he started playing in films, playing quite serious roles in films. And then he made this with his friend Jean-Jacques Goldman, who was also living here nearby in Montrouge. They made this song, Les Restos du Cœur, to found their caritative initiative, which was the idea of giving food to those who didn't have to eat. So I translated this into English. No, today it isn't. The French song is Aujourd'hui on n'a plus le droit d'avoir faim ni d'avoir froid, and you can find the translation on my sites. No, today it isn't right to be hungry in the night. No one lives just for himself, only others are the true wealth. And so we will try to use music to raise awareness, to raise money, like Coluche did, but also in the same time practically in Britain, Bob Geldof and this producer, his name was Albert Goldsmith, I think, made the Band Aid and later Live Aid, which changed the face of the world at some point. Okay, so I think we discussed most of the aspects that I wanted to tell you about. Children, genre literature, cinema classics, poetry, short stories from around the world. Well, this is one of my favorites, G.D. Salinger, A Good Day for a Banana Fish. I love Patricia Highsmith, also a Texan author who wrote these murder, crime, sometimes fantastic stories, the most famous being Ripley, the Ripley cycle, which has been adapted in cinema in many forms. We have this casting director whom I met once, who was the casting director for Roman Polanski, which we discussed earlier, who is a bad person, a bad man, but who was a great filmmaker. We have some classics here. Albert Camus' L'Étranger was just adapted by François Ozon, with whom I studied at La Fémis Film School. Yeah, we'll also talk about film schools. So Film School La Fémis, where I studied, and I was received first at the entrance exam, and then I was thrown out. I was last. The first will be the last. I was thrown out of the film school before I could do my diploma, because I went to Poland, where my father studied, and there I met people who had known him, among them Professor Jerzy Wójcik, who was a great director of photography, who worked with Andrzej Wajda on Ashes and Diamonds, and on Faraon by Jerzy Kawalerowicz, another great director. and so I changed my screenplay, and the old director of the school, Jacques Gajos, who was a very important character in French cinema, who founded the Art et Essai cinemas, and he was thrown out because of some story, because he had helped the daughter of his friends to get into the exam, and his friend was a very important character in the government who was giving money to the film school, and so he was caught doing that. He was thrown out. He was replaced by a woman who had no idea what a film school was. She was the ex-wife of a right-wing prime minister, and she didn't like the idea that I had to change my script because I wanted to do something that was more in relationship with my father, and so she just threw me out, and I never could make the diploma. And when I tried to return, never could make my diploma. That was many years ago. But then I tried to return to the film school, and to Femis Film School, and for some reason they just blocked me and refused me entrance to the film school. So they added this ridiculous to comedy, yeah. But I will return there. This is story. If what is the saying is everything always ends well, and if it's not well, it's not the end. It's not the end. So we have 11. I think we've gone through most of the chapters. We talked about the food chapter. Oh yeah, Coluche. Now Resto du Coeur is supported by Bernard Arnault, by the LVMH, the big fashion conglomerate, and also there's a big chef, a very important French chef, Thierry Marx, who supports them. And so we will talk about this, and also we will Cooking for Good. It's called Good Cooks. You can watch it on my webpage. And we'll also talk about an experience I had in Poland, where I was a volunteer at World Central Kitchen, this organization founded by Chef José Andrés from Chicago, who give food to people all around the world in conflict zones. And from this, how can we transit in a sort of natural way? I will try. We talked about ecology, that's chapter 3, Jewish history, artificial intelligence, of course, the development of artificial intelligence and how it's going to change the world of cinema, and how it's going to change the world, how it's going to change medicine. That is an extremely important aspect, because we're in the middle of Pink October, which is a French campaign to support research against the fight against breast cancer. And so I have a friend who's been just operated in Poland for breast cancer. So and my mother was also at the Pierre and Marie Curie Center, where she had lung cancer. She died after 2 years of lung cancer, of chemotherapy. And now they're developing new therapy, new ways to heal this terrible disease. Actually, they're working with Google artificial intelligence, so that's also a very interesting aspect. And the hospital Pierre and Marie Curie, which is the most modern hospital in Europe and probably in the world, from what I know. And it's just close to the area where Emily in Paris was shot. Emily lives at Place de la Contrescarpe, which is just next, so it became a tourist attraction. So we will take you there, to the 6th arrondissement, the 5th and the 6th arrondissement, with all the writers and famous characters who live there. And we will also have another chapter of the Decalog, one of the Hotel Bellamy, which is in the 6th arrondissement on Saint-Germain. And we will also have a part for adults, where we'll discuss Henry Miller with his book Sexes, his trilogy, The Rosy Crucifixion, and Miller's lover, Anaïs Nin. There was also a film by Philip Kaufman about them. The film was very bad. Read the book. Back to the joke earlier. Here's another of this adult part, Les Nuits Fauves, by Cyril Collard, who was a young filmmaker whom I met actually once. and he was one of the first victims of the AIDS epidemic, and he made this book, which was later made into a film, Les Nuits Fauves, with Roman Boranger and himself in the main part. And then he died shortly after this film, after completing his film. So life is short and not so sweet. If you want to follow the Decalogue, please hit like and subscribe. You can support me on my webpage, www.latalo.com. There's a payment button. You can add as much as you want. 10 euros is good to support this cinema course. You can buy the books that I'm recommending here. They're all very good. I mean, we're trying to, Hitchcock had this saying that you can only make good films from bad literature, and he made great films, but I think he was wrong. And also there's another saying by Samuel Fuller who said there's only a handful of stories. I mean, if you look at this, there's so many stories, there's so many books to be read. I'm just showing you here, but the whole house is full of books. Oh, here's another one. Ryszard Kapuściński, very famous Polish journalist who wrote about the Africa and the Middle East. And he was a very... actually, there was a documentary about him. I don't think any of his films was adapted into... or his life even was adapted into a story. I'm not sure about that. They made a series of this for Netflix. The story of my grandmother and her friend Zuzanna Ginczanka. Oh yeah, I started telling this, and I started going into another drawer and back and forth. So Ginczanka and my grandmother came from the city of Rivne, which is now in Ukraine in a war zone, and they emigrated. They fled to Warsaw. And there, Ginczanka, my grandmother, became a nurse and later a doctor. And Ginczanka, who was extremely beautiful, became a poet. And so her name was Shoshana Polina Ginsburg, but she took the Polish name of Zuzanna Ginczanka, and she was working in this satirical magazine called Szpilki. Who was directed by this graphic designer Eric Lipiński. We will talk about him later on the chapter on the Polish poster school, which I made the film about the Polish poster school, and which was one of the most important graphic movements in the world. And so Ginczanka went to Warsaw. She befriended the great authors of the time, Julian Tuwim and this is my grandmother as a nurse. Here is the house. My grandmother married this very rich man who was later killed during the beginning of the war, and they had this house in Warsaw. Isaac Horowitz, his name was. And Ginczanka befriended the great writers of the time, Julian Tuwim, Witold Gombrowicz, probably Bruno Schulz, although the chronicles don't really say that, but they all would meet in the same cafe, because life was in the cafes. And then war arrived. Ginczanka and my grandmother fled to the city of Lwów, which now is called Lviv, and they were living there with the communists, Stalinists. Stalin had overtaken Lvov. They were living there, and Ginczanka was working as a translator for a communist magazine that translated text by the communist authors. And then the Nazis arrived. They started organizing pogroms, terrible pogroms, and my grandmother and Ginczanka were hiding in the house where they lived. They moved to another floor. They were hiding, and finally My grandmother escaped and she went to Warsaw, and she was hiding in Warsaw on the Aryan side, not in the ghetto, but on the Aryan side. And Ginczanka was denounced by her neighbor, and she wrote this beautiful, terrible poem, which you can also find on my webpage, her testament, Non omnis moriar. Actually, the title is Testament. I found this information recently, and you can read it on my page, and I will also organize readings here of the poetry of Zuzanna Ginczanka. And so she was denounced by a neighbor, but she managed to escape. She went to Krakow. She was hiding in Krakow during the war with her fiancé at the time. She also had a husband, but it was more for the papers, of course, for the documents. And then both of them, her husband and her boyfriend were both killed. And then she was finally captured, and she was killed a few days before the end of the war. And this poem, this testament, survived because my grandmother had hidden it somewhere. And there's a mystery about this, which I will try also to address in this series, is that how did this one poem survive? And why this one? It's a beautiful poem, very moving, and I think I will just have to find the text and I will read it at the end of this lecture. So thank you very much. I think I've discussed everything I wanted to tell you. So I will try to, this is sort of my testament, which I wanted, my artistic testament, which I wanted to leave here. And I hope you will be interested by it. I hope you will be able to support me somehow, because frankly, I'm in a very difficult situation these days. Because since I came back from Poland, and I'm living here in my mother's house, and it's terrible. I have a conflict with my half-brother who wanted to sell the house. I have a conflict with the mayor of the city, who's a right-wing guy, bastard, who wanted to destroy the house. I have conflicts with the people in the city around me because they don't want me to make pictures on the street, with street photography, which is like, Henri Cartier-Bresson, all these photographers made this beautiful street photography. Robert Doisneau, who lived here, the famous author of the Kiss, at the Hôtel de Ville, who also lived here in Montrouge, made all these beautiful street photographies. Or there was another great photographer, Edouard Bouba, which we will talk about, who made photographs of Paris streets. He also photographed Juliette Binoche and worked for the Hermès company, which we'll also discuss. And he was also living here in Montrouge. And when I try to make these photos on the streets, people just attack me. I've been attacked, like physically attacked, at least 3 times, and insulted and thrown out at least 10 times, or threatened for something which is completely legal. So I have to say that this, plus my friend who's in Poland who has this cancer, all of this is just terrible. It takes a terrible toll on my psychic, on me as a person. And so, if you can support me, that would be cool. I'd be very grateful for that. But thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. So you can follow me on my social media, on latalo.com, on my Latalo Studio is my Instagram. Decalog is the name of the series and the name of the workshops. And I hope to see you soon. So once a month is like this big thing which I'm doing, like this presentation that I'm doing now. But once a week we will renew contact, and I will provide you with some new material. And so I think the next chapter will definitely be dedicated to it should be logically, it should be writing. Okay, logically it should be writing, and then the next chapter should be writing, acting, and then photography, probably the next 3 chapters, and sound 4, and art 5, and production 6, special effects 7, editing 8. Wait, I lost something. 9 is distribution. The last one is distribution and the art of the poster at the end. So it's interesting because the end is at the beginning and the beginning is at the end, the last and the first. And the poster, you can watch the film about the Polish poster school on my website. And I invite you to the next episode very soon, in a week, on Monday morning. It's a good start. Monday morning, probably I will add some material on Friday, because Friday also is a good moment to meditate. In the meantime, I wish you all the best. Peace, love, and equality. Or, in the words of the immortal poet Bulat Okudjava, Vera, Nadezhda, Lubov, faith, hope, and love. Merci beaucoup, à bientôt, au revoir.